Welcome, everybody. My name is Ann Dolan. I'm the founder and president of Educational Connections. For over 27 years, our team has been guiding families through with academics, test prep, and college admissions counseling on their journey through school and beyond. I want to welcome you to day one of College Week. If you're the parent of a high school student or a middle schooler, you are in exactly the right place. In today's session, Start Early, Stress Less, College Admission Secrets from a former UVA evaluator, I'm really excited to have our expert here, Kristin Landis. Hello, Kristin, and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me today, Ann.
Let me tell you a little bit about Kristin. She is a college consultant here with me at Educational Connections. And while here, she supported hundreds of students through their college admissions process, helping them to differentiate themselves, stand out, and to ultimately get into the college of their choice. And prior to coming to Educational Connections, Kristin was an admissions evaluator at the University of Virginia for 11 years. And there she received and reviewed thousands of applications from in-state, out-of-state, and international students. So Kristin, let's go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Tell us why early matters. Why, if when you're applying to a competitive school, it makes sense to start in the early years.
Absolutely. Well, this is a perfect time. I'm sure a lot of students, if they didn't go back to school last week, they're going back to school this week or in the next coming weeks. So this is a wonderful time to start thinking about college, whether your student is in middle school or they're entering into 12th grade. And so the key to all of this is to have a thoughtful, well thought out plan, to do things with intention and with purpose. And just having time, the luxury of time, allows you to do that. So whether you're in 8th grade or you're 11th grade, it just gives you time to think about what you want in a college experience, to explore your interests, to do all those things. Because what I do and what my other colleagues do at Educational Connections is we help students elevate what I call their narrative. And their narrative is what, when I was at UVA, I was always asking myself, what will a student bring to my college environment? What contribution can they make both in and out of the classroom? And the answer to that is, what is their narrative? Their narrative is what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, what type of community citizen will they be on my campus? And the narrative is the alignment of your coursework, your activities, and your interests. So just having that luxury of time helps you craft that narrative in a more thoughtful and intentional way.
That makes sense, Kristin. So you really need kind of a runway to get all that in order. All right, let's switch gears and talk about trends. What have you been seeing? Because a lot has changed in the last couple of years, even in the last year or 6 months.
Oh, totally. And we've been doing these for like 4 years now. And every time we get together, I talk about an increase in applications. And yet again, this past admission cycle, there was again a 6% increase in applications. So it's just becoming more and more competitive. When I started at UVA back in 2010, there were 24,000 applications. This past year, they had over 64,000 applications. That's just one school's example, but I could give you a litany of other schools. But this also, as you said, things are changing even this year. Everything is in college admissions is constantly changing. And so this year is going to be a little bit unprecedented because we're seeing, first of all, the first year of a decrease in student population. If we think back to 2008 during the recession, those children are now applying to colleges. So they think there may be a dip in applications. And then also with what's going on in the international landscape between federal funding coming to colleges from the administration and international students, whether they're going to come to the US and get visas. So things are always changing, which is why it's more important than ever to stay your course, have your plan, because you just don't know what the landscape is going to look like when your child is applying to colleges. So historically, we have seen an increase in applications from year to year. Last year, we saw a huge spike in public university applications versus private university applications, especially in the South, like double-digit increases, and for a variety of reasons. Again, we don't know what this year will look like. We're also seeing a rise in AI use in the admissions process. Just like AI in life in general, the admissions process is also part of that. And Virginia Tech just came out in the last month. They were incredibly transparent, and this gives you an example. They said that they will have 2 evaluators evaluating their essays, and their essays are really important. They have their own essays. They don't use the Common App. One of them will be a human, and one of them will be an AI person, or not even person, an AI, whatever, virtual person. And if there's a 2-point differential in their 12-point scale between the essay grading, then they'll bring in another human. But this is showing the importance of AI and what it's playing in this process. They're also using, I'm not saying UVA, Virginia Tech, but other schools are using AI to evaluate recommendations, because recommendations take a long time to read as well. So we, again, constantly evolving. Test scores. You and I have been talking about test scores for years, and we have experts at EC who talk about testing all the time. But testing is becoming increasingly more important every single year since the pandemic. It was important before the pandemic, got thrown out with the pandemic, and it has systematically becoming important again. There have been a number of admissions offices coming out and saying that it's one of the few ways they feel they can see an accurate reflection of academic fit and preparedness for their schools. We've seen Miami, Ohio State come back to testing, Tennessee. Next year, Auburn just released, they're coming back with testing mandatory next year. And they even said this year, 95% of their acceptances will be from students who submit testing. So testing is super important again. And then lastly, early admissions. We've been talking for years about the power of early decision, and I will be talking later this week about that power. It can be incredibly powerful depending on the school, but nowadays even early action is the new regular decision. So we're also seeing applying early is still an upward spike. All the more reason to have a plan, because we're submitting applications earlier and earlier. I have seniors who have already submitted applications at this point. So those are the trends so far, but again, it's always in flux.
Wow, so they've already submitted their applications.
I've had some, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, amazing. Tell me a little bit more about early admissions. How do you think of that when you help kids create a balanced list? And when all of our consultants work with students and they're thinking about this balanced list, how does that come into play?
With applying early?
Yes, early decision.
Oh, early decision. So early decision, we'll talk more in depth later this week, but early decision, and just for people who don't know what that is, this is a binding contract between your student, the parent, the guidance counselor, and the university. If you are accepted under the early decision application option, you must go to that school. The only way out of that contract is if you do not get the financial aid package that you need. But I was literally with a student yesterday running through the numbers of the 3 top schools that she has and what their early decision acceptance rates are versus the other either regular decision or early action acceptance rates. And in some schools, we're talking Emory, Duke, Vanderbilt, and mainly private institutions, you're looking at double-digit acceptance rates versus like a 4% acceptance rate. So the power of early decision can be huge. Some of these schools are accepting over half their students in early decision. And just to show you how powerful it is, the University of Michigan, first time ever this year, is having early decision. University of Southern California brought it back for one area. I think maybe in the future, they may bring it back for other programs too. So super important. I have a family of 5. All 5 of us applied early decision when we applied to college.
It makes sense. And thank you for explaining that. I know we're talking about younger students, but so many parents have questions about that.
Of course,
so I appreciate it. All right. So Kristin, let's talk a little bit about what admissions offices really want in a student.
Sure, absolutely. So when we started, I talked about that narrative being the alignment between the courses you take, the activities you participate in, and your interests. So that's what colleges are looking at. It's your authentic voice. It's sometimes people use the word unique, but I feel like every student is unique. So I use authentic, your authentic voice. What type of student will you be at our school? And are we the right place for you? So they look at a number of things. And if you look at it as like a pyramid, it starts with the basics. Program rigor and academics is first. Program rigor is how hard are the classes your student is taking versus the person sitting next to them in English class or walking down the hall at their school. When colleges evaluate students, they evaluate them in the context of their high schools. It wouldn't be fair to evaluate a student who goes to a private school in DC to a student that goes to a small rural school in Appalachia. They don't have the same programs available to them. They don't have the same courses available to them. So you're looked at in the context of your high school. And if you're applying to highly selective schools or even selective schools, they're looking to see that you took the hardest classes available at your school. And that's in the 5 core subjects: math, science, history, foreign language, and English, whatever that looks like for your school. Now, not everyone can take the hardest classes in every subject. There are some people, but most people can't. So then they're looking to see where you put your foot on the gas and maybe where you took your foot off to the gas. People don't realize this, but your transcript actually tells a story about you. Let's say hypothetically, I'm really good at English and history, and I'm super interested in it. So if I took the hardest classes that my school offered in English and history, but like I'm really bad at math, and I truly am really bad at math. So I would take a lesser math class, and that would just so that I would have a balanced what I can handle. And people sometimes say that like the $1 million question is, should I take an AP and get a B, or should I take a lesser class and get an A? Well, if you're actually thinking that you can't get an A or a strong grade in an AP, then you probably shouldn't be taking it. So program rigor, that's the first thing. And then of course, grade performance. Grade performance is always going to be important. Grades are going to get you in the room. There's no way to get around that. And so doing the best you can. And so when we talk about program rigor, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to start early with this, because I have students who they come to me in 12th grade and they say they want to be an engineer, and yet they didn't take the right courses when they were younger in 8th grade or in 9th grade or 10th grade to set them up to look competitive for being an engineering student. The same goes if a student wants to major in business. Did they take those electives that were offered at their school in business? So program rigor, academics, super important. Next comes activities. What you do outside of school. What are you passionate about? And this is all about quality, not quantity. So people think, there are 10 slots on the common application and you've got to fill out all 10. No, I rather see 5 or 6 really in-depth, even 4 things that a student really is passionate about, that they've dove deep in, that they maybe have a leadership opportunity in it, or they've made an impact in that community, or they've done it for a long period of time, versus 10 things where some of them are like attending a meeting once a month. That doesn't really show depth of engagement or any sort of real contribution. The other thing is, for me, when I was reviewing applications, community service, giving back to your community in some form or fashion, was a non-negotiable. So making sure that students are doing some side of service. And when students come to me, I'm like, well, let's think about service. And I'm like, if you rather, I can give you tons of opportunities, but if you rather put needles in your eyes than go work at a food pantry, let's go find things that you're interested in that align with what your activities and interests are. And then lastly is authentic character. And this comes through in what I call the human insight component of the application. And that is what teachers have to say about you. A lot of people don't realize that most colleges, not all, but most colleges require or allow you to provide recommendations in some form or fashion. They also, some allow you to bring out like maybe your scout director or an employer or something, or another other recommender. And then lastly, the essay, which of course is always on people's mind. The word essay is actually a misnomer. It's actually a personal statement, a narrative. It's not an essay you write for school. It's when you have the opportunity to tell these people who have no idea who you are, just a little bit about what's important to you. So
Thank
that's
you,
the
Kristin.
pyramid. Sure.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It's a lot.
It really is. College admissions is so different now than it even was 5 years ago.
5 minutes ago.
Yeah, 5 minutes ago, seriously. There's also a difference between qualified and competitive. And this is so important. Can you dig deeper into it?
Sure, absolutely. And I think if people maybe after this whole week, what they're going to leave with is everything in college admissions the answer is it depends. because I'll have students that say, well, I already took, the 2 years of a foreign language or the 3 years of foreign language that I have to graduate from high school. So I'm done. I don't want to take foreign language anymore. And I'll be like, well, let's look at the colleges you want to apply to, because being a qualified candidate and being a competitive candidate are two different things. Because if you want to go to a highly selective school, they want to see that you've done 4 years at least of a foreign language. So it definitely varies. Meeting those minimum requirements for graduation doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be competitive for a university. And that also includes what we talked about with regards to activities. It's quality, not quantity.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kristin.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about what students should be doing at each grade, starting with 9th grade.
Sure. So I would really kind of group 9th and 10th a little bit together, because there is a little slightly difference between the two grades in terms of what I would want them to concentrate on, but in general, it's mainly the same. So there are a number of things that we want to think about. Again, this is a wonderful time, the beginning of the school year, to look at your course selections. Look, it's not too late to add and drop classes. So looking at what your student is taking, are they taking the appropriate rigor for those 5 academic subjects? Is there an area where maybe they could challenge themselves a little more that they're not? Are they using those electives in a really thoughtful way? Are they using it in a 9th and 10th grade, it's exploration. I'm in my late 50s. I don't necessarily know what I want to do when I grow up either. I can't expect a 13 or 14-year-old to know what they want to do. So this is a time to explore. If you think you may be interested in fashion, take the fashion merchandising class. If you think you may be interested in computer science, take a computer science class. The 9th and 10th grade are those times to explore and then dive deep, and we'll get to that later. But so looking at your program, what courses you're taking, and if you're taking the right rigor. Then I would say in the next month is a wonderful time when all the high schools have those club fairs, that students go to them and go around and look at the different organizations that your high school offers. See if there's something that interests you or something that you already would like to understand something about or explore that you may think you may be interested in. That's a wonderful time to start doing that exploration, attending those information sessions, and picking 1 or 2 things that you think you might want to work on that year. And again, because remember, it's really about bandwidth too. For my students, I always say the number 1 thing is your physical and emotional health. After that comes your grades, and then comes all these other things. And we want to be doing things that you are interested in, that excite you. We don't want you to be doing things that you don't really want to do. That's not the whole point of this. This is the point to find out what your authentic voice is and what your passion is. So for 9th and 10th graders, that's what I would be doing. I would be doing exploration. By the second semester of 10th grade, I would hope that students would be starting to have a little bit of idea of what it is that they may want to pursue. Those summers are super important. And you don't think about summer in the summer. You think about summer in the winter before the summer, because there's so many opportunities out there that you may want to take advantage of. There are programs that you can apply to that are selective, that have applications. There are maybe internships you may want to pursue, or shadowing people. All those things take time to set up. And so thinking about your summer in the winter is a really smart idea, no matter what grade you're in. The other thing that I want 9th and 10th graders to be thinking about is testing. Remember, we talked about how important testing is. Well, it's in 9th and 10th grade that we start thinking about that. If a student has already taken Algebra 2, it's a time to explore that SAT, that ACT. And I know that, Anne, you've got Pete later on this week who's going to really dive deep into all that. But we set up a testing strategy in 9th and 10th grade. We follow through on that strategy in 11th grade. So 9th and 10th grade are really the best years to start teeing things up. And then in 11th grade, believe it or not, even though they're starting school now in August, in literally almost 6 months, we will start getting our applications going. We will already be asking teachers for recommendations in the spring and April of junior year. There are some high schools where you already have to have fill out recommendation forms for counselors. I work on with all my students doesn't matter what year they are, on a resume. It's something that was kind of an organic document that we keep up to date. So if something comes along, we have it that we can apply to or that we can give to someone. So 11th grade, and then they should be implementing that testing strategy, which Pete will talk and Renee will talk about later this week. So lots to think about in each grade. And if you're in 8th grade, and I know that there are a bunch of 8th grade parents and on here, it's a wonderful time to start looking at the high school that your student's going to be going to. What types of offerings do they have both in and out of the classroom? And start coming up with a plan.
Kristin, speaking of clubs and extracurriculars, I remember you telling me, and I think you mentioned it on a webinar once, about a student that you worked with who didn't really find her calling through what the school offered, and she ended up starting, I believe it was an English Honor Society.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I love the path that she took.
Sure.
It wasn't, you know, just a cookie cutter model. She did something different.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my student, she's actually going to college this year. She's off, but she was really interested in English, an avid, voracious reader, and was already helping tutoring some students on the side. We looked at her high school. She actually goes to a really prominent high school in Northern Virginia, and they didn't have an English Honor Society. So we worked together, got in touch with the national organization, and she brought an English Honor Society to her high school, which now has like 150 members. It has a tutoring service available with it. They also go into elementary schools and do story time. So it's really fabulous. And thanks, Anne, for actually bringing that up, because just doing clubs in your school it's great, but it may not be enough for a lot of students. So I don't want people to think that they're just regulated to what their school has. This is a time to be creative and think outside of the box. I have a student who's applying to college this year, and he's interested in engineering. And he didn't actually go the traditional engineering route. He took an engineering class in school, but he's actually working at a hardware store, and he's helping customers, helping them design things and build things. I mean, that's super cool, because everybody can join the robotics team, which is wonderful, and you should do it if you're interested in engineering. But having these really kind of interesting things on the side are fantastic. I have another student. She is really interested in fashion. She's done a bunch of programs in the summer with regards to fashion, but she's also worked in a consignment shop, helping people put together outfits. And she also worked with, there's a nonprofit in Northern Virginia where she helps gather executive clothes that then can be given to people so they can go on interviews and stuff like that. So really thinking outside of the box when you're thinking about what you're interested in is wonderful, whether it can be something that includes like an academic side, but also some service in it. And maybe even sometimes people call this a passion project. I have a student I actually met with over the weekend, and she's a docent at a local museum. And she is going to help train other docents at other museums in the area. And she's put together this whole training program. She did that totally on her own. It has nothing to do with her high school. So I don't want students to ever think that they're just kind of confined to the box of what their high school offers, because there's so many things out there that you could do on your own. When we go to fill out the Common App, a lot of times students are like, oh, well, you know, I've been doing art on my, you know, I'm an artist at home, but I can't put that on. I'm like, why not? Of course you can. I'll never forget, I had a student a few years ago. He had this gorgeous origami sculpture on Zoom in in the background. I'm like, what is that? He's like, oh, I do origami. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And we put that as one of his activities on his Common App because he spent a lot of time on it. And he's actually quite talented at it. So I don't want people to think that they always have to do the traditional things. There's so many things out there that you could do. And then that is something that we elevate on your application.
That's definitely a great way to differentiate yourself. Thank you for that, Kristin. Sure. All right, so let's talk about exploring options and finding the right fit.
Yeah, so we've been talking about one side of the coin and why starting early is super important to kind of craft that narrative and elevate that when the time comes for your applications. The other side of the coin is looking out there and doing exploration and researching, like, what does your student want in a college experience? There are 2,000 universities in the United States, and even if you open it up internationally, there's even, lots more. Like, what does your student think they want? And I don't expect a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old to know that. It requires like a lot of introspection, what you think is important to you. I call it, what is your ski slope? I've had students in the past who they want to ski, and you say, well, you're not going to pick a college based on skiing. Well, no, of course you're not. But if it's something that's important to you and something that you want to continue for 4 years, it's something to consider. So if somebody wants to know where the best skiing is, I can tell you where the colleges are that are near it. But, sometimes students, I'm really into nature. I want to be able to go hiking. Or I want to be in a city because I want to take advantage of cultural opportunities in theater and those types of things. So having those conversations with your parents, thinking yourself, what does that look like? When I meet with students, I always say, what do you want to do on the weekends? Like, what does that look like for you? I once had a student, it was really important for her to have beautiful libraries. I'm like, okay. So we did lots of research together, find her gorgeous libraries, because it was really important to her that she had a place that she felt was beautiful and that where she could study. So that's why starting early, and it's never too early to start looking at schools. If you live in the DC area, there are lots of colleges. If you're somewhere else in the country, go to the local college by you, even if your student is even interested in it. Just starting to see schools, seeing students on campuses gives you an idea of what you like and maybe what you don't like, which is just as important in a college. And having those, there are also something called demonstrated interests, which Renee and I are going to talk about later on this week. That is super important to start early with colleges, which really is literally what it says, showing interest in a college and building that relationship with the college for those schools that actually factor that into their decision-making processes. So while you're also pursuing your passions and your interests, you also, for families, start thinking about what you want in a college. Start visiting them. There's so much research material out there on the internet. There are virtual panels and discussions. There are college fairs, virtual tours. Start seeing what you like in a school and start putting that list together. And then I always say to my students, it's their job to find the schools that they'd want to go to. It's my job to make sure that list is a balanced one. And you mentioned earlier, and a balanced list. And what that means is having schools in the different buckets. And I know most people have heard these buzzwords, the schools where if your what your GPA and your testing look like, if it kind of falls in line with what accepted students are, that's what's called a target. If your testing and GPA is higher than what that kind of average student is accepted at that school, that would be what people call safety. I call it a most likely, because college admissions is not an exact science. And then if a school has a low acceptance rate, I would say anything under 20%, that's a reach for everybody. So that would be a reach. And so making sure you have a balanced list. And because the college admissions landscape is always in flux, I always say to my students, there should not be one school on that list that you wouldn't go to and be excited about. And that just takes time to compile that list. I like to have my students have their core list of schools by July after their junior year, before they go into their senior year. Because my goal with all my students is that they have their Common App and a lot of their applications done before they even go into the fall.
Now that makes sense, Chris. And I know everybody else on our team feels the same way, that
Yeah, absolutely.
really you don't want kids to go into their senior year super stressed out. Like, I have to do all this stuff and I need to still get good grades.
Yes.
All right, so everyone, I'd love to share with you what else we have coming up. We're going to go to Q&A in just a second. But tomorrow we have Renee Minnick with us. She's talking about the essential steps specifically for juniors and seniors and what you can do to help yourself stand out as you're applying. And she's wonderful. She's been in admissions for 28 years and so has so much knowledge, just like Kristin, about the subject. All right. I'd also love to bring in Kathy Gould. Kathy, are you there?
I'm here.
Hello, Kathy. Kathy, you're the point person when parents want to talk about college admissions, and they have questions about our program, or they just really want to better understand what does somebody like Kristin or one of our other experts do. They talk to you. What do you talk about in that phone call?
Yeah. So when parents call, they typically have a number of different questions. And sort of in general, a parent might call and say, this is our oldest. We don't know how this process works. Or I have parents that say, my husband and I went to school outside of the country, so we're not familiar with the way it works here. Or they've heard that the landscape has changed dramatically and they're worried about that. Basically, they don't know what they don't know, right, in general. And then if they are a parent of a younger student, like an 8th or 9th grader, they ask the question, is it too early? Which Kristin was just addressing, right? They want to know about course selection. Should they start looking at that? A lot of parents of younger kids say, we don't know what they want to study. Of course, like you also alluded to, they're 13 years old. How would they know? But they often say they don't have a passion or they don't have an interest, or how do we develop that? What can they do in the summer? Students of older parents are coming in talking about the list. They'll say, for example, my student is talking about the same 5 colleges that all of his friends are talking about. And we know there are thousands of appropriate schools for him or her. We want to broaden his horizons. How can you help? They ask questions about testing. So difference between the SAT and the ACT, the timing of that. Should they submit scores or not? And then they go on to, we have a number of students that need some help because of executive function issues. So the parents say, can you keep my student on track in terms of meeting all the deadlines and getting all the work done?
Thank you for that, Kathy. So if they schedule a call with you, they'll talk about those things. I know you're going to explain a bit about our program and see if it's a good match.
Yeah. So when they call, then the first thing I always do is get a little context. And because we want to meet them where they are, right? So, and I always say to parents, okay, I have the student's name, I have the grade level, and then I say, tell me what you've done so far. And if it's nothing, that's okay. Because we want to I want to be able to guide the conversation appropriately. And then they tell me a little bit. My student is, a rising 10th grade student at this particular high school. They're thinking about this kind of program. These are the schools we've seen recently on family road trips. So I get a little bit of background. They're an avid tennis player. History is their favorite course. They give me some general information. And then I go through a series of questions. So I ask about GPA. I ask about test scores if they have one yet. I ask about what kind of courses they've taken. Do they have even a preliminary list yet? Do they have an idea about what they might want to study? What kind of extracurriculars are they involved in? So I gather all of this information because, again, it informs our conversation. But then if they go on to work with us and they're going to work with Kristin or one of the other consultants, I share all of that information with the consultant before the consultant even meets with the student, so they can hit the ground running. And then I also share what the process looks like. So if you're meeting with Kristin or Jen or Renee, what topics are they going to cover, right? And then how do we match a student with a consultant? So parents often ask that, how do you know which consultant is best for my particular student? We review the cadence of the process. So it's different if you're an 8th or 9th grade student versus if you're a junior or you're coming in fall of senior year. How many sessions? How long does it take? And then just some logistical things, like there's an interface that Kristin or Renee or Jen would use with the student that we get the student set up in. So I'm sort of the liaison to sort of set the foundation, answer any questions they have for me. And then when they get to more specific needs, that's when the experts step in. So then I gather all the information and I hand them off to one of their fabulous college consultants.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Sure.
And I know parents can talk to you by scanning the QR code. Also go to our website and you'll see a link to schedule a call.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And do you want to share your email too, just in case?
Sure. My email, I'll say it first and then I'll spell it because my name is spelled a little differently. So it's Kathy@ectutoring.com and it's KATHI@ectutoring.com.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Awesome.
Thanks, Ann.
All right, Melissa, I'd love to bring you in because I see that we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Yep, our first question is from Gloria. She would love if you could give a little advice for homeschool students.
Homeschool students fall into their own bucket when they're looked at. That's everything I said about looking at students, evaluating them in the context of their high school, obviously does not count for homeschooled students. Homeschool students, I know there are lots of like co-op programs out there that some students take advantage of. I think really that's where the most out of the box thinking takes place. is for homeschool students, really pursuing their passions, whatever those are, for independent projects or finding organizations where they can collaborate with in order to elevate those things that they're interested in, is really important when you're a homeschool student.
Thank you, Kristin. All right, Janae says, when is the best time for a student to take the SAT for the first time? My daughter's in 11th grade and wants to take both the PSAT and the SAT this fall, so she can take the SAT again in the spring if she doesn't do well.
Okay. So, well, I don't know, Anne, do you want to take that? Or do you want me to address it?
Sure. I mean, I think taking the PSAT again now is a great idea. You can certainly take, if you want to go with the SAT, if you're pretty happy with the PSAT results and you just want to stay in the SAT lane, you can take it again in the fall of your junior year. Statistically speaking, students score best in the spring of their junior year. So oftentimes kids will take it a couple times in the fall, or maybe once in the fall, once in the winter, and then another time in spring. But typically students are taking it at least twice, often 3 times. Krista, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Most high schools, you're taking the PSAT in October. That's when they offer it. And then if the student has done prep, there's one in November, December, like Anne said, there's the fall. And then if it's the SAT, it's coming back again in March and May, or in June, and then August. Our philosophy at EC is that we try not to go into senior year with testing. So through that window that we're just talking about, to take that SAT. And if the student wants to explore the ACT, EC has is experts in both and provide prep in both. So they can take a practice ACT and then ascertain which test they prefer better and then concentrate on that one.
Thank you both. And day 4 is all about testing. So if that's an area you're interested in, we encourage you to join us on Thursday at noon. All right, next question is from Jim. He says, is testing an accurate barometer or indicator of a student's success in college?
Well, that's a loaded question. If you asked that question a number of years ago, there would be a lot of people who would say no, because not everyone has the same resources to test prep. And so that they feel like it may not be a level playing field. That orientation has shifted in the last few years. And so colleges are coming out and saying that they are putting more of an emphasis on testing. I don't think we're ever going to be totally done with a test optional landscape. I mean, the UC system in California did away with testing altogether. I think there will always be schools that are test optional. Our job at EC is to really have our students have options. So we pursue all avenues as best we can. So we prep, we take it, and then we see where the scores lie. And then we make the decision depending, remember it's always depending on the school that you're applying to, whether we would submit or not submit scores if it's a test optional school, because we definitely don't want to submit scores if it's going to hurt you.
Thank you. All right, Jennifer has a question about early decision. She says, do you find that early decision will help make a difference for competitive public schools too, when it comes to the acceptance rate?
State schools, if they have early decision. Not all state schools have early decision, but yes, does it have as much as an impact as it does with private institutions? No. But again, you need to look at the acceptance rates for early decision versus regular decision or early action. But when you also look at the acceptance rates, also look at the percentage of the student body that is accepted in early decision. It's a 2-part analysis to it. So let's take UVA, for example. When I started at UVA, they didn't have early decision in 2010. They had it, they did away with it. They brought it back later in I forget what year, if it was 18 or 17 or something like that. And systematically, year after year, if you look at their statistics, they're accepting more students in early decision. But there's not as big an acceptance rates difference at UVA in early decision than there is at, let's say, at a Duke or at a Vanderbilt or at some other institutions.
Thank you, Kristin. All right, another question. Our school system only submits weighted GPAs, but is it true that colleges are ignoring those weighted GPAs and looking at the students' actual grades? Okay,
we all can say together, what's the answer? It depends. It depends on the school. So some schools will factor the weighted GPA. When I was at UVA, they preferred the weighted GPA because it factors both program rigor and grade performance. There are some schools that will recalculate your GPA. So it really just depends on the institution, whether they will look at the weighted only, or if they will take it, recalculate it, and look at an unweighted.
Thank you. All right, and now a question from a different Jennifer. She says, increasingly, I hear colleges do not give more weight to AP or honors classes. Do you agree? And based on what you see from the admissions point of view, is it better to take non-honors than the others?
No, I don't know where that statement's coming from, because they're always looking at program rigor. They're always looking at how hard the classes are that you're taking, because let's say hypothetically you've got a student taking BC calculus or multivariable calculus, and you have another student just taking regular calculus. That's not apples to apples. And so colleges are looking to, they're accepting students that they will be successful at their university. They don't accept people to set them up for failure. So they want to see students, they want to see the level of difficulty in the courses they're taking to see what type of academic fit and readiness they have. So if your school doesn't offer honors AP or IB classes, that's one thing, or DE classes. But if they do, I've never heard of a college that doesn't factor that in.
All right, and a follow-up question. Are you saying that an A in a mainstream class is preferable to a B in an honors class?
No, I didn't. I said it to an AP class, not an honors class. Here's the deal. You need to look at your student, and you need to have an honest conversation with them and with their capabilities, with their interests, and then determine a program that is appropriate for them. In a perfect world, we would all take the highest level courses that are offered, but that's not necessarily the right thing for most students. So you want to pick and choose where their talents and their abilities lie and their interests. And I would put my foot on the gas in those classes, and the ones where they maybe challenge a little more, then I would take my foot off the gas a little bit on that. I don't want to say that there's emphatically a rule to this, but I would much rather want to see an A in a lower level class than a student who did poorly in an upper level class.
Thank you. All right, Christine is asking about AI. So she is asking, can you please explain in more detail about Virginia Tech using AI to review essays? What are they looking for? Are they looking for cheating, such as AI being used to write the essays, or are they using it more of a tool for the evaluators to actually evaluate the essay?
They're evaluating the essay. That's what they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mary Alice, how to finance college is a whole different question. What are some go-to resources that you recommend for parents looking for information on that?
So financial aid as a whole, as you just said, is a whole different lane. All of us at EC, the college consultants, we do deal with financial aid. I don't profess to be an expert in financial aid, but I have many resources. I help my students. I guide them through the process. I think the first place to start with financial aid is to look at the FAFSA, which is the kind of the gateway to need-based aid. There are two different types of aid. There's merit aid and there's need-based aid, and they're very different. Need-based aid is literally based on what your income level is, the different factors with regards to that. There are calculators out there on the internet that you can use to determine whether you will be, if you can qualify for aid. And then there's merit aid. And different schools, it depends on how you qualify for merit aid. Most schools, you qualify automatically if you apply by their deadline for merit aid. You don't have to submit something additional, but there are some schools that you do. There's something called a CSS that you have to submit for some schools, and other schools that have other requirements to apply for merit aid. And then there's scholarships on top of that, which is a whole different ballgame. There are a lot of search engines out on the internet that you can use. You can literally, I could get a scholarship for wearing a green shirt today. There are so many scholarships out there. So I would suggest starting to research those early. The scholarship season usually doesn't start until the senior year, but you can at least identify scholarships that you may want to apply to. Your local guidance counselor office is also a good resource for local scholarships.
Thank you, Kristin. And it looks like we are out of time. Do you want to keep going or do you want to stop
You
here?
want to take one more question?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. All right. One more question. Are IB programs viewed as positively as AP programs?
They are considered of the same rigor as AP classes. It is a very different program. It is taught very differently than AP classes. So I spend a lot of time with my students who are in IB schools going over the IB program. It is a very rigorous program, but it is looked very highly by most colleges.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa and Kathy and Kristin. Thank you, as always, for being my guest this afternoon. I hope this was helpful to everyone out there. And wish you all the best in your admissions process. And if we can be of help, feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks, everybody. And I hope to see you tomorrow for day 2 of College Week. Have a great day and bye-bye.